SCP-7354 The Cruor Pool. The SCP Foundation is known for securing, containing, and of course, protecting. But SCP-7354 is an anomaly that forces the Foundation to go against that mantra. Let's begin. SCP-7354 is an approximately 10-meter by 18-meter basin filled with human blood, which was discovered on January 7, 2009, in Irkutsk Oblast, Russia, during a surveying expedition. The basin contains a multifaceted spatial anomaly that prevents its contents from seeping into the surrounding soil and dramatically increased its internal dimensions. Ground-penetrating radar scans of its interior have not yielded conclusive data. The anomaly's enclosure adjoins a building complex that bears Foundation insignias and appears to have been built at some point in the mid-1950s, though no documentation has been found of such construction taking place. At irregular intervals, highly complex carnomantic constructs, meaning entities linked to Sarkic magic, coalesce within the pool. These entities are invariably aggressive, physically resilient, and dangerous, with most manifestation events on record having resulted in structural damage to the building complex and/or casualties among personnel. As of 2007, the average length of time between manifestations has been decreasing. Further in the document, we get a short list of more manifestation events over a 2-year period, starting with the first recorded one in January 2009. A bat-like entity with a wingspan of 4.1 meters emerged from the pool. It had a mass of serpents protruding from its torso and extending downward in place of its legs. The entity could spit an extremely caustic fluid from a far distance and screamed loudly, without cessation. The instance was shot out of the air using an M2 Browning anti-aircraft rifle, then neutralized by STF-Theta-12 with standard corrosive and incendiary weaponry while it attempted to regenerate. The next entity to manifest only 2 months later was described as looking like a cross between an echidna and a sun bear. It was largely unaffected by gunfire and possessed quills that were coated with a rapidly progressing neurotoxin. This was only discovered several hours after neutralization, as the toxin was transdermally active and only began showing symptoms after significant exposure had occurred. The creature successfully broke through the north wall of SCP-7354's enclosure shortly after its manifestation, charging through an adjacent hall and injuring several staff members before being neutralized by STF-Theta-12 with incendiary weaponry. A month and a half later, a levitating chitinous sphere with a diameter of 2.6 meters emerged from the pool. The entity possessed several large eyes that were irregularly spaced along its surface. When an eye was destroyed, another opened elsewhere along the entity's surface within a couple of seconds. Any complex living organism that the entity focused one of its eyes on would suffer from rapid tumor growth and was largely unaffected by most forms of weaponry. The entity was later neutralized via multiple sledgehammer strikes by an STF-Theta-12 agent who lacked enough organic components to be sufficiently harmed by tumor growth. In being neutralized, however, the entity exploded and doused the agent with a caustic fluid identical to that produced by the large bat entity from earlier, damaging their inorganic components severely. The fourth manifestation, a 4.8-meter tall reptilian humanoid, capable of healing its wounds with unprecedented speed, regenerating organs, limbs, and/or portions of its own brain within a few seconds. Corrosive and incendiary weaponry, which typically counteracts carnomantic self-repairing, was insufficient against the creature. The instance successfully breached containment within 15 minutes of manifesting and escaped into the surrounding forest. As the entity was projected to reach a civilian population center within 48 hours of its departure, Mobile Task Force Alpha 7, Last Chance, was dispatched to neutralize it. Alpha 7 is an MTF operated by the Emergent Threat Tactical Response Authority that was specifically created for the utilization of SCP-7356-A in combat scenarios. An ancient humanoid entity associated with Sarkic schism known as Havel, or Abel, After terminating the anomaly, Abel remarked that the carnomancy animating it was strange, but could not verbalize its observations with greater detail. Other members of the team noted that Abel appeared visibly unsettled for the rest of the day. Only 5 weeks later, a 3.7-meter-long arachnid with 2 large human mouths on its back and multiple prehensile tube-like appendages coming out of its stomach emerged from the pool. The instance escaped the enclosure shortly after manifestation. Throughout its containment breach, the anomaly displayed a higher degree of intelligence than previously seen instances of SCP-7354, setting up ambushes and traps using nearly transparent webbing. On several occasions, when dispatching prey, the entity would extend its extra appendages into its victim's ears, forcibly remove their brain, and ingest it, whereupon its human mouths would begin repeating the victim's deepest secrets in their first language. Not only did this cause some small amount of discord among the task force at the site, but the anomaly ultimately came upon a Foundation higher up who had been visiting Area 354 for an unscheduled inspection prior to the manifestation event. Upon taking his brain, it proceeded to repeat several pieces of highly classified information. The entity was eventually neutralized through the usage of incendiary weaponry, after which all of those present were administered Class C amnestics. Not even a month later, 2 humanoids of indeterminate ethnicity that were conjoined at several points on their bodies emerged from the pool. The entity was fired upon shortly after manifesting and expired almost immediately. Medical examination of its corpse revealed that beyond its physical abnormalities, it was identical to baseline human beings. Unfortunately, the data on the next 7 entities is lost. But the 14th manifestation in January of 2010 was a cephalopodic entity of unknown size and appearance. Its manifestation event went unnoticed at first, as it remained submerged in the pool. But over the course of several hours, the anomaly slowly extended numerous tentacles from within the pool, moving them beneath the newly fallen snow in the enclosure to avoid detection from the cameras. It proceeded to squeeze its tentacles into various tiny cracks and faults in the enclosure's walls that had formed from previous manifestation events and subsequent repairs, stretching them out into the site's foundation. Eventually, all of the tentacles began moving simultaneously, erupting from the ground to destroy large portions of the site all at once. The tentacles retreated back into the pool after sustaining heavy damage from the security personnel, but not before dragging 9 staff members into the pool with it. The entity, along with the missing personnel, have not been seen since. Not long after, a large feline entity resembling a panther emerged from the pool. The instance's head and back were covered with organic, semi-transparent crystalline structures that were analogous in appearance to ice, and any light that passed through any of the structures was given cognito-hazardous properties. This entity was joined by a massive feline entity resembling a lion that was 8.8 meters tall and armored by a chitinous exoskeleton. Its blood was superheated to the point that contact with unprotected skin caused third-degree burns. These entities were joined by a fully organic replica of Agent Stone. Whenever the instance suffered an injury that lowered its body mass, any separated portions of its body weighing at least 5 or more kilograms would grow and metamorphose into a duplicate of itself while it regenerated. Fortunately, the duplicated copies do not share these same traits. If they did, this anomaly theoretically could have caused an NK-class Grey Goo scenario. Clearly, this was a lot for the site to handle, but before we get more information on what happened, we're given a note from the director of Thaumatology Department about carnomancy. He says that as far as schools of thaumaturgy go, carnomancy is rather predictable, as it's grounded in physical principles such as alchemy. If you want a carnomantic construct to have structure, you need a bit of bone. Strength requires muscle fiber, intelligence requires neural tissue, and so on. This pool appears to have missed this memo, and he's not just talking about how it's been able to make do with blood alone. The entities that emerge from the pool, going by their current understanding of Nelka carnomancy, shouldn't be possible. They've seen these constructs use carnomancy in ways they thought only Karsists could handle, including levitation, tumor generation through line of sight, near instantaneous regeneration, and more. This doesn't just make them dangerous, it makes them unpredictable. Every manifestation event is another curveball, and you can't contain what you can't prepare for. At first they believed that the pool's carnomancy was different, altered in some way. They assumed, perhaps justifiably, that an additional anomalous force was at play. To sum up months of research to prove just that, they were wrong. They have no idea how or why SCP-7354 does what it does, and they have no idea what it's going to do next. During the incident, the three entities manifested within 28 minutes of one another. The resulting breach was the third most severe since the containment crisis of 2001, when Henry Bow orchestrated a string of massive containment breaches, leading to the formation of Etera. Nearly 90% of the site's personnel were already deceased by the time MTF Alpha 7 arrived on site. Next, we're given a short excerpt of one of the agent's body cameras. The ground is littered with the bodies of area personnel, and duplicated entities and loud impact sounds and organic tearing can be heard in the distance. The team lost Abel amidst the fighting, and his feed cut out. Fortunately, they find a hole in the hall of a corridor that leads to the pool's enclosure. They remark that they were trying to keep Abel away from the pool, as Command doesn't want too much cross-contamination between Nelka anomalies. The agent enters the enclosure, finding the ground to be covered in snow and chunks of inhuman gore, along with Abel kneeling at the edge of the pool. The agent calls out to him, stating that the captain needs him to keep checking for stragglers, but Abel does not move. Eventually, he says that it happened here, and this is Ion's grave, and that this is his blood. This is where he died. Abel turns towards the agent, revealing that he is silently weeping. This is rather strange, as not many articles mention Grand Karsist Ion ever dying. Next, we're given an excerpt from a historical document written by one of Ion's clavigars, titled The Seventh Ordeal of Ion. I will read it verbatim. All the flowers bloomed the day wretched Vajuma descended upon our world. It had not come in fullness, but in aspect, in avatar. For surely, if the Devourer had arrived in its entirety, the simple gravity of its terrible mass would have extinguished the sun. Even now, I am not entirely certain what I saw. Vajjuma was a boiling sea of teeth, frothing with acid. It was a vast and detestable stomach. It was Yaldabaoth. Abandoning mortal form, the Ozermok's spirit filled the sky. In one hand, he held a great flame. In another, his staff of muscle and bone. And in yet another, he carried an Archon's heart. Grand Karsist Ion strode forth to meet his opponent. Ion and Vajjuma fought for 11 days and 11 nights. It was a horror to behold. Each strike lit up the heavens. Each blow was heavy enough to shatter mountains. And still, the Avatar was whole, unbroken, hungry. Ion saw the coming dawn of the 12th day and knew that he would not live to see its dusk. Ion mustered up all his strength, all his courage and cunning, every piece of himself that had not yet been devoured. He summoned up everything he was, had been, and would ever be, and set it all alight. In a thunderous explosion like none I've seen before or since, Ion split the firmament open and cast Vajjuma back into the void. It's noted that the veracity of this document has been heavily disputed by members of the Church of the Broken God, who claim it is propaganda that attempts to overwrite a historical battle between the Mechanite army and Lashrakal. They contend that Grand Karsist Ion's death had actually taken place several months prior at the hands of High Priest Bumaro. However, Bumaro has not publicly confirmed or denied either account. Next, we're given a short conversation between Abel and an unknown individual. Abel is angry that they didn't tell him the blood was becoming faster. But the unknown individual says that they did tell him. But Abel says that they only told him the blood was growing more dangerous and said nothing of its speed. The individual asks if the distinction even matters, to which Abel says of course it does. The art of the Nelka is that of adaptation, evolution. It is only natural that the blood would hone its weapons over time. But speed? Ion isn't here to sustain it. After nearly 3,000 years, it should be getting slower. Abel then asks if the individual knows what happens when you die, physically. The other says that your body decomposes. Abel says that this is true. The body decays, and in doing so, it becomes a house for parasites and scavengers. He says that old life gives way to new, as that's just the way of things. After a pause, Abel then asks the individual if he knows what happens when a god dies. The final thing we are provided is a log of exploratory mission Delta. This is now the 4th exploratory mission, and it's explained that after the first 2 missions failed, manned exploration of the pool's interior is disallowed. So now the Foundation is trying out a drone piloted by AI. Broadcasting footage of the mission itself is also dangerous, so the AI is instructed to describe everything it sees. On day 1, the AI says that due to the spatially anomalous nature of the pool, it has elected to measure its progress in days rather than meters, as that appears to be a more reliable metric. The first 2 days have nothing to note, but it's on the 3rd day that the color of the surrounding blood appears to be darkening in hue. It's gone from a deep crimson to a shade of brown. The AI says that it knows it's not due to the lack of natural light, as it has long passed that threshold. Now on day 4, the AI notes that the blood continues to darken, with it looking closer to black now. Nothing of note happens until day 6, where the blood has become completely black, and it seems to almost swallow up the light from the floodlights. It wasn't until day 10 that the AI started to see little motes of light in the distance. It tried to follow one, but it never appeared to get any closer. It says that they reminded of something, but it can't figure out what. The following day, the AI states that nothing of note has happened, but at least it has something to look at now. On day 13, it remembers what it was. It compared the lights with photos in its internal database, and the motes around it appear to be a 1-to-1 match to the stars in the night sky, only transposed into 360 degrees. If its instruments did not read that it was still within a body of liquid, it might mistake its environment for the void of space. Nothing of note happened for the next 12 days, and we're left with a single image, with the description of its contents expunged from the record. It can be difficult to piece together what's happening, but if we go back to what Abel said, he mentioned that the pool should be producing less and less entities as time goes on, since Ion's body has likely decayed away. But instead, it is only producing more and more of them. Ion reportedly died giving everything he had been or would ever be, and cast Varjuma or Yaldabaoth back into the void. Yaldabaoth is the ultimate power in the universe within Sarkic mythology, responsible for creating all life through the process of consuming other gods and worlds, and exhaling life throughout the cosmos. While Neo-Sarkites appear to admire Yaldabaoth, most Sarkic scripture describes it as their true enemy. In the process of casting Yaldabaoth back into the void, Ion died and created the red pool with his blood. It's notable that the AI, during its exploration, matched the small lights it saw to stars in the sky, and specifically referring to it as the void of space, specifically capitalizing the word void just as the scripture did. It's possible then that it's not Ion sustaining the pool anymore, and instead Yaldabaoth herself, set to return from the void. Ultimately, this is an evolving story, and anything is possible within the SCP universe.